And we are back indeed. Just going to give the other guys a minute or two to get back on. Hello. I think you're right the first time. I think it was God. I don't know, but it froze for most of us. Hi, Penguin. Alright, so where were we? So we were talking about selecting cigars. Okay, so this is the Elegantes. This is a 2017 box. When I got them, they were very, very matte and almost green looking. When I say green, I don't mean green literally, but they've got slight sort of a raw look to them. They looked a little bit, they weren't dark, they weren't brown, and they just lacked that really nice oily sheen on the wrapper. They're still quite matte, but they're starting to develop a bit of a sheen. They're starting to get a little bit of oil, and there's a little bit of tooth on the wrapper as well. So these are developing nicely. I've had a fair few of them now, and they're much, much better than when I got them. This box here, this is a Saint Louis Ray number 2. These are a 2018 box, and from the off, very spicy, very flavorful, very full on. Juan Lopez, sorry. And if you have a look at the, I don't know how close it's going to focus, but you can see the little dots, tiny little dots on the wrapper. That's the tooth, it's called, and those contain essential oils, which is where you get a lot of the aroma, a lot of the flavor coming through. So if you've got a cigar which looks like it's got tiny little black dots on it, that's going to be a flavorful cigar. And over time, those flavors will just generally infuse, if you like. It's not an aromatic cigar, obviously, but it'll infuse those aromas into the cigar. And also, when you light the cigar, the room note that you get is hi Phil. The room note that you get is also going to be coming out from the wrapper. So that's always going to give you an enjoyable smoke. This is the Saint Louis Ray Tesoros, which was at the tail end of 16, was it? Yeah, it was December 16 this was released. When I got these also, they were okay, but they didn't look fantastic. But look at them now. Beautiful chocolatey coloured wrapper with a nice sheen on them, and they do smoke very, very well. But when I got these were already looking good. If you get a cigar which is going to look very, very matte and looks a little bit off colour, it hasn't got that rich coffee coloured wrapper on it, you probably want to stay away from them. But when you get very old cigars, they will have lost some of those essential oils. Some of those oils will have, the sheen will have evaporated, but it will be a stunning cigar. So I think that you have to kind of look at all aspects of it. You've got to first of all know how old it is, and that's, you have to also know the provenance of that cigar. You have to know if you can trust the vendor. If he says it's a 20-year-old cigar and it looks very matte, there's a good reason for it. It's 20 years old. It will lose some of its sheen, some of its luster. but it might be a phenomenal cigar because all of that has been infusing in that cigar and marrying the flavors in with the wrapper, the binder, and the filler, and that will just be a beautiful aromatic experience. But if in reality the cigar is only, say, a year or two old and it's very matte looking, don't touch it. Obviously, if they let you put this to your nose, if it's aged, it should give you a very sweet, musty smell. It should be quite a almost pungent, but sweet and musty. I've often called that aroma an intimate aroma. Without going into too much detail, you can make your own mind up on that. It's got that kind of sweet, sickly sweet aroma to it, which you only get on Cuban cigars. You do not get it on non-Cubans. And that is really, if you get that on a cigar, it's almost a mixture of cocoa and sweet, musty, tangy aroma, and that's just it's phenomenal when you get that. I've got a few of those in my humidor, which I have them. They're singles, they're special cigars, which I keep individually in plastic tubes, and every so often I'll just open them up just to get that aroma. It's something else. There's nothing like it, and I just don't smoke them because once I smoke them, I won't have them to have that aroma, and the smoke itself will be amazing. I've got two cigars in particular which I've been sitting on for a long time. I've shown this before. This is a Trinidad, an old Trinidad Fundadores, and still with the old band, so you can see it's old, and the aroma on this is just to die for. It's just unbelievable. I just open it up every so often just to get a noseful. And the other one, this is a really long cigar. This is a Sancho Panza, Panza I think it's called. The aroma on this one is not as strong, but it's still got a very good aroma. This is I think from 1999, something like that. So this one is pretty much 20 years old. These tubes, I've tried to find them and buy them. I think you can get them if you search eBay or Amazon. I think sometimes you get drill bits and things like in these tubes, but I get these usually in Davidoff. If I buy a decent cigar, they'll put it in one of those if I'm lucky. Talking about cigars, I'm kind of in the mood for a cigar now. The Thesaurus is very nice, Dan, if you can get it still, yeah. I don't know how much you'll pay for them. When I got them, they were a very good price. I got them from Spain. Hi Maui, how you doing? No, it hasn't arrived yet. You really ought to, when you're sending overseas, you've got to do tracking. Because, I don't know, things just seem to disappear when you send them overseas. I've had £16 a cigar. That's, okay, I paid, when I bought those, I think I paid less than £10. But it was when they came out, so you're taking a punt because you don't really know if they're good or not. Yeah, I mean, after this amount of time, you'd expect to pay that. Well, 12 is better, certainly. £120 for a box of 10. It's not too bad. Maui, it depends which service you're using, I guess. I'm pretty sure USPS you can track, and when it comes over to Royal Mail, they track it, continue to track it. They might give it a Royal Mail tracking number, but I think it depends which service you use. Doesn't make sense, Maui, I don't know. Upman Royal Robusto is a very aromatic cigar from day one. I've had, let's hope so, Maui, I'm looking forward to it. The Royal Robusto, H. Upman generally, if you get a good batch, they're fantastic. I've mentioned many times the Connoisseur number 1 is probably my generally favourite cigar. I don't have any at the moment, but that would probably be my next purchase when I've got the funds for it. They're aromatic, and not aromatic in the sense of like pipe tobacco. There's nothing added, there's no flavours added, but the blend creates an aromatic flavour. And I find that with H. Upman's more than any of the other brands, in terms of having that kind of floral, aromatic kind of flavour. There's other brands in the Habanos lineup which are fantastic, like I mentioned before, Cohiba, Monte Cristo, they're all great, Partagas. But for some reason, H. Upman's, all of their lines seem to have, besides for maybe the Mag 56, which I showed you before, was a very smooth cigar. I don't know what it's like now, but when I had them originally, when they came out, I smoked a fair few of those. They were very tasty, but they didn't have that real sort of pronounced floral flavour. The Connoisseur number 1 does, and it's a cheap cigar when you buy it online, and it's a nice size. The Mag 48 is not, for me, it's not a typical H. Upman profile. It's much more of a chocolatey profile. Well, the D4 is one of the world's most popular cigars. It's one of the highest selling cigars, the Cuban cigars. And I guess there's a reason for that. But again, coming back to the Royal Robusto, I've had Royal Robustos which had, say, 4 or 5 years age on them. I remember in 2016, I think it was, I got a couple of boxes which were 2012, which is when they were released. The LCDH, the La Casa del Habano version, which is what it is. It is a La Casa del Habano version. They first released it in 2012, I believe, either 12 or 13. I think it was 12. And that year was fantastic. A lot of times when Habanos release a cigar, that first release is the one to go for, many times. The first Behique that ever came out, which is like, I guess, a Cohiba on steroids. If you look at the design of the band, it's kind of reminiscent of just a higher sort of branding, if you like, of the Cohiba, but it's got Cohiba elements in the design of the band. But as I say, it's like a Cohiba on steroids. It first came out, the Behique came out first as the 52 ring gauge in 2010, and by all accounts that year it was just phenomenal. It was the best ever year of Behiques, and in fact when you opened up the boxes of 2010s, they were already, that I'm saying in 2010, which is way before I got into it, but I've sort of spoken to a guy who's a collector of cigars. He said that when you opened them in 2010, when they were first released, they were already full of plume, and they looked like aged cigars, and they tasted phenomenal. So I kind of dream of getting one of those 2010s at some point. Hi, Flacka. David, Robusto cigars, it's just the way of the wrapping, is it true? No, Robusto is a size, it's a Vitola. Robusto is the classic size for Robusto is a 5x50, which is 5 inches long by a 50 ring gauge. That's what a Robusto is, or Robusto. In America, it's slightly bigger. you might be a 5.5 inch by a 52 or even a 54. The undercrowns are, I think, 54s, and their Robusto version is, I think, a 54, 5.5 by 54, I think, maybe 52. But like everything in America, everything's bigger. Just look at never mind. In terms of wrappers, the most common wrappers that you will hear talked about will be the Connecticut, Maduro, Corojo. That's the sort of non-Cubans, really. I mean, you do get a Maduro Cubans, but I personally don't like them. And there's just an untold number of different wrappers now in non-Cubans. They've got so many different breeds, if you like. They've sort of blended so many different seeds with. I mean, you get Habano seeds and you get Corojo seeds and you get this seed and that seed. It's just you can't keep track of it anymore. That's also, to some extent, makes life easier when you smoke Cuban cigars, because it's just Cuban cigars, Cuban wrapper. I think when they produce the Maduros for Cuba, they're just simply sun-grown. But I'm not sure. Whew, right, let me grab a bit of coffee. Right, so should we go for a cigar or a pipe now? And what should we smoke? Yeah, Robusta cigar for me is also my favourite Vitola. The size-wise, it's perfect. Robusto, or sometimes a Petit Robusto. I mean, this is, strictly speaking, a Petit Robusto. It's probably 4 inches by 50 ring gauge, but it's a nice size. I just find the 5 by 50 is just the perfect size. Royal Dutch Elites, those will be New World cigars. They'll be either from Nicaragua or Honduras, something like that. I mean, the first time. A pleasure, Dan. Night, sleep well. Shavua tov. My first interaction with cigars probably goes back to probably 20 years ago, near enough. And those days, I used to buy every so often a box of Villager or Villiger cigars, you know, the square ones, which were cut at both ends, in the yellow box. I really enjoyed those in those days. I mean, I knew nothing about it. Then it was just as a novelty to have one every so often, as a lot of people do. They're not cigar smokers, but they'll have a cigar. About storing them, I didn't know about humidification. I knew nothing about it, but I knew that I liked those. I used to buy them every so often. And my first interaction with a Cuban cigar, I think, was a Romeo and Juliet, which I got at a wedding. The guy was giving them out. The host of the wedding, the bride's father. Or maybe it was bar mitzvah, actually. I'm not sure. And again, I didn't know much about cutting them and all that kind of thing. And in those days, whenever I had a Cuban cigar, what I did was I just took the end of a match and I poked it. I just poked a little hole in it, like that. And I smoked it, and it tasted fine to me at the time. Little did I know about the troubles that I would have later on with the sort of bad flavours, sort of bottling up there at the top. As I say, I was completely ignorant in those days. Still am pretty much, but know something now. Okay, I think we should put these cigars away. before they dry out, and then we'll get a pipe on the road. You're probably right, David. Just to give you a nice sight, look at that. Nice little soldiers standing pretty in a row. That's the San Luis Rey Tesoros, Spanish regional edition. A very nice smoke. But it's my last box, so I haven't started them yet. The Olivas is a very nice brand, and I really do like the Melanios, the Serie V Melanio. The Serie V Bellicoso I did smoke a fair bit of, but I'm finding them that they don't have the edge compared to the Melanio. The Melanio is just that little bit more refined, a little bit more sweetness, a little bit more of a cinnamony flavour, and all round just a little bit more enjoyable. You probably pay a bit more for it, but I don't think it's a whole lot more compared to the Serie V, and I think it's worth the extra few dollars. Yeah, if you're buying the Serie O and the Serie other letters, they are great value. Well, Penguin, I think any cigar, if it was your first cigar, would have made you feel sick. Don't think it would have mattered which cigar it was. When I first started smoking a pipe, and I went to one of the when I first joined the Pipe Club of London, so I went there to JJ Fox's, and I bought a what was it? It was a Ramon Allones, and I don't remember which one it was, but it was a Pyramides shape. It had a domed top. I don't remember which one it was. I think it was a limited edition, possibly. And I've mentioned this a few times. I was smoking it on the way to I don't know what I was doing. I was why I was with my son. He was in we were in a convertible BMW. I remember smoking it parked up somewhere around here, and I felt really ill after smoking that. The interesting thing is that we always go back to it, even though we have a bad experience. We just go back to it, you know. If we're messing around with electricity, fixing a light or something, and you get electric shock, you're careful next time, and you don't touch the wire again. But you know, we have a bad experience with a cigar, we still go back and touch, don't we? Gluttons for punishment. Hi Mike, how you doing? We were talking about Erinmore before. I just finished a bowl of Erinmore mixture. You're waiting for my decision, David. Well, I have prepared some flake, some Erinmore flake. It does smell good. And if I light a cigar, that's going to be at least another hour and a half. Unless I could leave it halfway through, I suppose. I can always finish it tomorrow. Yes, Tim, my father, cigars, some of them are quite pokey and spicy. Funny you should say that, Andrew, because I've got a little package winging its way over to Canada as we speak. That was very nice of him. I figured he might send you some. I hope you've got plenty of rabbits to enjoy that. Regards to old cigarettes, I'm not sure. I have to check back. It could be, and I've forgotten, possibly. You know what my memory's like. All right, good night, Tim. Okay, so this is a Aroma. What was this called? This is my last one of these. This is from 2008, I think this is from. And this was called the Maestros. A very good smoke. I think we're going to have this. David, that's especially for you because it's my last one of these. Hi, Sam. This tastes good without even lighting it. In case you guys don't know who Sam is, Sam shoots from the hip. So if he says something that you don't particularly like, don't worry about it. His bark is worse than his bite. Because most of the time he just goes, meow. Silly sausage. Definitely, David. Oh, I already am from the first draw. This cigar is a great cigar. The problem with these cigars is that once you start the box, it's impossible not to just keep smoking them. And I have made this last quite a long time. I had this. It's a box of 10. I generally buy boxes of 10s. I don't buy 25s that often. And the regional editions are generally in 10s. Occasionally you'll get a 25 box, but most of them are in 10s. And this one, I got them maybe a couple of years ago. and I think I started smoking them pretty much straight away, and I managed to make them last a couple of years, which I'm happy about. But it's always sad to see a box finish that you're unlikely to ever get again. Andrew, yes, generally speaking, I can't say it's always the case, but generally speaking, you'd hope at least that they'll be from the same yield, the same crop. But it's not guaranteed. What certainly is not guaranteed is the rolling, because they could be rolled by several people in one box. And even if it was the same person, he or she might roll one cigar good and the next one not good. Generally speaking, the quality of the rolling with Cuban cigars has definitely improved, but it's still nowhere near as good as non-Cubans. The Olivas, Undercrowns. I've smoked many of the non-Cuban cigars. I don't think I've once had a badly rolled cigar. The consistency and obviously the quality control that goes on is just second to none. It really is unbelievable, and I'm still completely baffled as to why the Cuban industry can't do the same. Yes, Maui, absolutely. I don't understand why the Cubans can't do the same thing. Because you still get badly rolled cigars from Cuba. Hi Kenjiro. Yeah, you're probably right, Chad. Certainly the founding fathers of the non-Cuban industry were all Cubans, that's for sure. And they can roll a good cigar, even the current ones, but they're just not consistent enough. I mean, this one is perfect. It's rolled very, very well, and it's a beautiful smoke. That's one thing which they do get right, and that's not obviously the people. It's the climate, it's the soil, it's everything. The actual flavors that you get in a Cuban cigar. For me personally, for my preference, my flavor preference, it just knocks any non-Cuban cigar out of the park. Which I know a lot of you guys won't like to hear that, but it's, to my palate, they're beyond compare in the non-Cuban world. You do get the odd cigar which is close, but as a rule, they're just not the same. Yeah, Maui, I fully agree with you on that one. I didn't enjoy the Talisman very much. When I do my first impression videos, I say it the way it is, the way it seems to me. I remember when I did a video on a Behike, and I wasn't that impressed with a 54 Behike. 52 I enjoyed, but the 54 I didn't enjoy that much. And I just described what I was experiencing, and I got quite a lot of negative comments. Because, people just see the name Behike and they just assume, you just can't diss it because it's a Behike. You can get Behikes which don't smoke that well. And the same happened with the Talisman. That's why you can still buy Talismans. You cannot buy for love or money retail. Actually, you can. There's only one shop that you can buy them in, and that's Davidoff, because he specialises in aged cigars and he charges a fortune. And good luck to him. But you can't buy the Robusto Supremos anymore, and the only place you can buy is Davidoff or specialist cigar shops who have kept old cigars, and you'll pay an absolute fortune for it. They were £40 when they came out. In Davidoff now they're about £180 per stick, per cigar rather, I don't use the word stick usually. But the Talisman you can still buy here in the shops. A lot of the shops only have them in the box, and you can't buy them singly anymore. But I think there is the odd one or two shops who still sell them singly, individually. And I've got, I can't afford to buy them by the box, so I bought some singles, and I've got one single left, which I agree with you, Maui, and I've left it as well, and I'll come back to it later on. Yeah, Andrew, the prices here for cigars is just ridiculous, and I feel bad about it. You know, when I go into cigar shops, and I might buy one just to smoke there, but I won't buy the stock. I just can't. It's just ridiculous. It's stupid money. But I feel bad that I'm not able to support the shops. For instance, the Dunhill 1A and JJ Fox's. I feel bad when I go in and I'll only buy one or two cigars. But I can't help it. It's just I just can't afford it. Maui, I would recommend highly that you stay away from unless you're doing it for investment, but if you're doing it to smoke, if you're buying them to smoke, just get the regular lines. Forget the limited editions. I would say get the regionals before even the limiteds. I'm really not impressed with the limited these days. Really not. I find them a little bit overpowering, and it's kind of getting closer to non-Cuban cigars. They usually put a Maduro wrapper on them, or a darker wrapper at least, and they spice them up. And yeah, they're nice. I'm not saying that they're not nice, but they're overhyped, and you have to usually wait a while till they mature. And I'll give the same example as I gave before about the H. Hartman Connoisseur number 1. It's a floral aromatic cigar from day one. It gets better with time, but it's smokable almost straight away. I would say a year minimum, yes, but after a year, very smokable. I can understand that, Maui. What's your go-to blend, would you say, Maui? Pipe tobacco? Well, there is. Hi, Hector. How you doing? No slander, only truth. Kenjiro, the interesting thing is, and I think if it's true what I've read, is that the family approach to a lot of the tobacco houses in Nicaragua and Honduras, these kind of places, are fantastic, and they're really building a community. You know, they're investing in schools, they're investing in the infrastructure around their tobacco farms, and that's obviously for themselves as well, but it's also to just create a community. And they do, from what I can see, they look after their people. I can't say that happens with every single one, but McLaren 40, yeah, I can get that. I'm trying to really stay off mine. I'm trying to let them get some age. They're fantastic already, so you can imagine what they'll be with a bit more age. Enjoy that, David. What's that, Chad? Oh, really? Wow, Maui. Now I'm jealous. Christmas cheers, I've got three. No, I tell a lie because Tim sent me some of 2013. But in terms of tins, I've got 3 years. I've got 14, and I've only got like a bowl or two left of 14. I only ever had 1 tin of that. And then I've got 16 and 17. And then some tins of the 40. Investment in community, yeah, absolutely, Chad. It's quite unique. If it's true what I've read, it's quite unique to see that. And that really comes from people who have really sort of invested themselves in what they do and come to a point where the money is not really it anymore. You know, they've made enough money to live off the rest of their life, and they're not greedy. And you know, when I have £100, I have to have £200, and they've come to a point where they're giving back. And of course, they're accumulating more, no question about it. But they're accumulating more also as a result of that policy, and it's really just very, very heartwarming to see that. Some people might say that it's not exactly the best trade to create a community around, maybe, but it's still good to see. It would be interesting to see what the next generation, how they handle it. So when you've got the founders of particular communities, where the communities are created altruistically, like if you take, for instance, somebody who works hard and becomes a millionaire, a multi-millionaire, very, very wealthy, but it's through their own hard work, and of course they've had good fortune and everything else that goes with it, but they haven't inherited it. They've literally started up from scratch and made themselves into a millionaire. And then you look at the next generation who haven't had to work so hard, and you see what they do with it, and whether they sort of continue and kind of continue building that legacy which was created by that founder, or whether they go in a different angle, in a different trajectory. I find that always interesting to see, and you see both. You know, you see some people who they don't sort of rest on their laurels and consider that because they've got money that they're better than other people, and they just can't carry on. They carry on working with the community, carry on doing what their father had done or parents had done, and you get others who just, you know, become playboys essentially, or become very arrogant. They might stay in the business world but become very arrogant and aloof. It's just interesting to watch people and see how, you know, people behave. It's really unlikely, Maui, you know, being here in the UK, to get American blends, especially ones that have gone out of business, is difficult. I have managed over the years, but I've gotten to a stage where I'm really happy with the tobacco that I've got, and I'm happy with the tobaccos that I can buy here in the UK. I think my palate has matured enough that I can actually see. In the beginning, when I was getting a lot of American blends, such as esotericas and these kind of things, I found a lot of the English tobaccos here to be quite bland comparatively, especially when comparing to McClelland and things like that, with the richness and the spiciness that they could tease out of their tobacco. But as time goes on, I'm really, you know, appreciating some of the regular tobaccos that are available. This 2002, I haven't seen others similar to that myself. It's a really great pipe, and this rustication is something else. The rustication on this one is great. It's really a chiseled look. It's not the same as the Ascorti style and the Ciroc style. It's a little bit different to the Ciroc, a little bit chunkier, a little bit more of a chiseled look to it, a little bit more angular. Each of the strokes of the chisel are a little bit more angular, and it's just nice. It smokes very well. That's more important to me. It smokes very, very well. And the nearest that I got to it was that the other one, the sandblasted one, and that also smokes very well. And this one is, I'm still kind of getting into this one. It's quite a chunky bowl, this one. No, I didn't see those tins, Maui. I mean, he gets some really old tins sometimes. Pipe stud. If it would be simpler to just order stuff and get it over here, then I would probably, but Dunhill blends, yes, they are still available, the ones that are available. So Nightcap, I think, is all done, pretty much. I don't think you can buy Nightcap anymore. You can still get some Dunhill Navy rolls. Wow, $900, that's a lot of money. You can get most of the blends still. I mean, if you go into the shops, you certainly, online maybe not so many, but if you go into Dunhill, to 1A St James's, they've got the vast majority of the tins still available. I think they've even still got some Navy rolls. And selling them at standard prices, you know, they haven't hiked up the prices. But I must be honest, the Sheraton versions are pretty good. I find here in the UK, people are not as hyped with stuff as they are in America. It could be just because you have many more people smoking in America, just proportionately. And the percentage of people that hype there is the same percentage of people that hype here. It's just a smaller number. That's possible. Yeah, it's a shame about the tin sizes. I don't know why they have to do that. It's crazy. It really is crazy. It's not just the Dunhills, but somehow some of the other companies have managed to keep smaller tins. Maybe it was just Dunhill, I don't know. Four noggins is not really a good indicator of pricing, to be honest. I do like Four Noggins as a website. They've got a great selection of tobacco, but I find that their consignment area of their website is quite inflated. I suppose, look, he's selling it on behalf of other people and he wants to make his cut. If people are willing to pay it, then good luck to him. That's a capital world, you know. Maui, have a great weekend. We'll speak soon. Yeah, but you know what? Somebody on here earlier on said that they got off eBay. They bought an 8-ounce bag of Penzance for $150, which is probably about 3 or 4 times the regular retail price. But you know, if somebody's desperate to try it, so for them it was worthwhile. I mean, they've got some GLP's tobaccos, 8-ounce bags there for going for $200, $300, $400. Pipe Stud has a Craven's mixture going for about $750. That's a 50-gram tin. That's crazy. Hey Art, long time no see. How you doing? I haven't tried the Eventide tree, but you should know, you're a Nightcap consumer. I haven't had a chance to watch your driving video, Art. I saw that earlier on. I just need to grab a picture of my cigar from my posts later on. Where have you incidentally? Look at the white ash there, really good. Where did you post, David? Are you on Instagram? Same name, David Mercury. Let me have a look. Oh, Maui's just posted. The best hot dog in town. Cool, there's so many David Mercurys here. Which one's you? I've got David Mercury 45. You any of these? Yeah, that must be it. You got your cigars in there. Alright, we'll follow back. Oh yes, hot chocolate I can see, David. And that cigar looks like a custom roll, is it? And a nice looking humidor you've got there. Or tray. Some interesting cigars. Oh, okay, I see you've got that. I have one of those in my tapador. I haven't smoked it yet. Don't know what it's like. This one here. Can't remember the name. You've got a really wide selection of cigars here. Lots of different singles. Candela? I've never heard of Candela. Cuban cigars are puro, so no, you wouldn't get that. You just wouldn't do that. You wouldn't get that in a Cuban cigar. Cuban cigars are puros, so it's just Cuban filler, Cuban binder, Cuban wrapper. They have no. They have nothing different. The only difference that they have is Maduro. A few of the brands have Maduro versions, but other than that, they're all standard. So Andrew, you smoked some Cuban cigars before? Oh, right, fair enough. Interesting to hear you say that, because judging by your palate of late, as I said in one of my comments, you seem to have a bit of an asbestos tongue. I hear that, Andrew. Yeah, I fully hear that. You know, stick with what you want. Once you get into those, that's another whole budget you've got to find. And truth be told, in terms of nicotine, you're really smoking a highly concentrated form of delivery of nicotine when you smoke a cigar, albeit naturally, but without the chemicals. But still, it's a lot of nicotine in cigars. Whereas pipe tobacco also has a lot of nicotine in it, and you don't want to be inhaling some pipe tobaccos. Most pipe tobaccos knock you like a sledgehammer, although some people do. You still there, Mike? Yes, Mike certainly seems to like the spicy stuff. So you like chili, Andrew, as well? Do you eat a lot of hot stuff, spicy stuff? Jalapenos? You'll have to show us some of your cooking, Mike. You always like to have a diverse output on your channel. Show us some of your cooking. You always seem to be cooking up something, rustling up something on the side there. I'm quite a, I wouldn't say avid cook, but I do enjoy cooking. I make a mean homemade pizza, and I make a fantastic shoulder of lamb. Oh yeah, haven't had it in a while, but it's good stuff. That's a toque that needs to be studied. Not with you there, Art. That sounds good. Smoky lamb kebabs. Well, after I get off here, it's a bit late, but I'm probably going to have a little bit of a not quite sushi, because the salmon is cooked, but it's like a chow mein type of thing, noodles and vegetables and salmon. We had a nice Saturday meal, a Sabbath meal today. We had my married kids came over and joined us, and my niece and her husband joined us. So we had a busy table, plus my own kids. We had to open up the table, extend it a bit, and we had a really enjoyable meal. It lasted a few hours, just sitting around, chatting, nice and relaxed. It's really good when you can just sit down. Also, from a religious point of view, on the Sabbath we don't use our phones, so no phones on the table, no technology in use. So it's just mano a mano, just people talking, and it's just great to have that oasis every week. Just, chill out, no technology, and just spending time with the family. Yeah, definitely. I remember where I live, we used to have next door us, literally right next door, an Italian family, and one person still remains, the son, but we had 3 generations living in the house next door. The grandparents, who were from Italy, they were Italians themselves. They weren't born here to an Italian family. their grandfather, I remember, didn't really speak English. So I reckon they probably came over maybe 20, 30 years ago. The son had married an English woman, and their children as well lived all in the same house. And in the garden they had lots of things planted, fruit trees, some I think they had some spices as well, some herbs, and in the front they had some beautiful lilies and things like that, they're quite tropical, which nowadays you do see it more often because the climate has gone up a little bit here in the UK, but you never usually would see it. And actually quite a romantic story. So the old couple, they would have you could hear every week or two they would have this family dinner, sometimes in the garden, and they'd have the grandchildren come over from some of their other children, and it would be almost like those provincial kind of scenes that you would see on like The Godfather and things like that, where everybody's sitting around a table enjoying each other's company and good food. And that went on for a number of years. I remember one time I had asked the old boy about the flowers, where he'd got them and how he planted them. We couldn't understand each other very much, but he realized that I liked the flowers. And a short while later there was some sort of young sort of seedlings of those flowers on my doorstep, which he'd obviously left for me to plant, which I did, and they did flourish for a few years and then they died off. I remember I think that the sort of the middle generation, the husband and wife, the English wife and the Italian boy, I think their marriage was kind of going down the pan, but as long as the whole family unit was there, she stayed. And I remember one day the old lady passed away. Good night, John. And so I remember seeing the funeral, everybody dressed in black with the veils and all the traditional kind of dress. It was really sad. But the old couple were so entwined, they were so bound by the heart. He couldn't cope. You'd hear him moaning. I remember just seeing him in the garden sort of saying things like, why didn't God take me first, and so on, that kind of thing. Within a year he passed away, and we found that just so, on the one hand sad, on the other hand romantic. He just couldn't live without her, and he wasn't ill or anything like that, but as they say, he died of a broken heart. If there is such a thing, he certainly did. Once they passed on, everybody else sort of flew the nest. The grandchildren moved out, the English wife moved out, and now there's just one guy living there. And he's a bit of a sad individual, to be honest, which is a bit of a shame. But it's not surprising that he's been left on his own. But hopefully he's not watching this video. But still, from time to time, we do see the family still coming and spending time together. The old boy's uncle, the old boy's brother. No, is it a son or a brother? I think it's a son-in-law. Is Italian. In other words, the guy that still lives here is brother-in-law. They still come over in the summer with their children, and we've seen them grow up from little kids into strapping big teenagers, probably married by now. But they come during the summer, they spend a few weeks here, they live here together with him for a few weeks, which is nice. Yeah, it's a different world. It just is a different world. People don't have the time for that anymore. It's really sad, and it's really important. I think it's really important to have these sort of family get-togethers on a regular basis. Number one, as your families grow, you sort of forget. I've got cousins who have had children, and I have no idea who they are. Literally no idea who they are. And that's the way it is. The world's a big place. It's also a very small place, but it's a big place as well, and people spread around over the globe. And you could have cousins who you never meet. So when it comes to doing a family do, whether it's a celebration or even, God forbid, a sad occasion, it's still, I make an effort to always attend when I can. And it bothers me sometimes when family members don't bother. But it's really important, if family, even sometimes after I've worked a full day at a wedding or something like that, and I might be completely knackered out, and a family member is making a wedding or something like that, and the wedding's still going on, I'll still go, just to pop in, pay my respects and go. It's really important. The more and more we're overtaken by technology, the more important it is to have something real to hold on to. And these are real things. If not for us, it's for the next generation. Because what hope do they have? Where are they going to learn that kind of behavior? They've got to see their parents doing it. The next generation, 2 generations' time, I don't know how they will interact with each other. I don't know. I honestly don't know. People who don't have religion or don't have... I'm not saying religion, probably not a good example, but people who don't have a vehicle by which to be close to each other, and some kind of means for regular interactions, and they're just on their phones all the time. I just don't know. I just don't know how it's going to look. Well, I don't know if it's the greatest generation. It's certainly the greatest generation to us. It's our previous generation. Hi, happy smoking. Possibly the generations before that were the greatest generation for our greatest generation, if that makes sense. It's just what we can relate to. And certainly in Jewish thought, there is a commonly received understanding that the generations, the quality of generations reduce with every generation. And obviously, each generation lives as best as it can in its generation, but it's a commonly accepted theme that each generation declines in terms of its quality, in terms of its spirituality, in terms of everything. And so therefore, one of the things we're always taught is, for sure, you've got to forge your way ahead in life, but always you've got to have a rearview mirror. People talk about, well, that's old-fashioned and it's not for this time and so on. And yeah, you do have to move with the times, no question about it. Certainly we don't want to go back to a situation where kids were beaten to an inch of their life. So certainly that's a way forward. But you have to look back. You can't drive without a rearview mirror. If you drive without a rearview mirror, you're likely to have an accident. And to learn how to drive our lives, you need to have a rearview mirror. I firmly believe in that. How to make head or tail of it, and what to sort of filter through, and what is good and what isn't good. For that, you go for guide. You take guidance, and usually, the way it's supposed to be, although it's not on many occasions, but the way it's supposed to be is that your ultimate guides are your parents. And as you get older yourself, you appreciate the guidance that you'd had. And we all say the same thing: if only we'd have listened to our parents when we were teenagers. But it doesn't work like that, and that's just the way it is. And you try to learn, and you try to learn as quickly as you can. But you just have to. When you say that the last generation was the greatest generation, we have to make it for ourselves the best generation, because it's the only generation we can relate to. We can't relate to 3 generations ago because we didn't see them. We can accept what our parents tell us about them, but that's why the previous generation is the most important, because they are a link to the generation before that, which was a better generation than their generation. our generation, for our kids, we are the link that will teach our kids and demonstrate to our kids what we've seen from our parents and our grandparents. So that's why it's really important to have that chain where you can tell your kid and try and educate your kid and say, you mustn't do this or you mustn't do that. The only way to really teach your kids is to behave it yourself, is to live it yourself, and you have to, they have to grow up living that experience, and therefore it becomes them. Their character is like that. But it's dying out. That's the problem, and that's why I say I don't want to get into religious chat, but if religion has, even for people who don't necessarily hold hard and fast to a religion, at least, even if you don't believe in things, that at least it gives you some kind of structure where most religions will revolve around family, and for that alone it's got some value. Well, David, we're getting well down the cigar. We're well over the halfway mark. Well, I agree with you, Mr. Iximba. It's definitely a problem, and I'm part of that problem myself. And it's about trying to find a balance. Social media is just completely out of whack. Well, the Japanese, I can't pretend to know much about them other than seeing that they seem to be a very focused nation. And despite being very hooked on technology, they still manage to keep it real. But I don't know about their young generation. I don't know. Currently smoking a Robena. Sadly, I think in the UK here, we're losing our way big time. The current generation, yeah, it's a bit of a contradictory in terms, isn't it, Mike? Well, Horatio Robena, was probably the father of Cuban cigars, one of them anyway. Some people pronounce it Robina. He passed away a couple of years ago. And he's another one, actually, who's actually Cuban, who actually is reinvesting in community. Because I think he's invested quite heavily, the son this is, who's invested quite heavily in schooling in Cuba. Alright, people, is there anything else anybody wants to ask or anybody wants to chat about before I knock off? I don't know, I'm not sure I would say he's the father of cigars, but certainly one of the Cuban fathers, if you like. I can't get this back in the jar now. Thank you, Miximba. I enjoyed it myself. It was really good. We had some nice chat. Good cigar chat for a change. Well, Mr. Kaleson, we've been going for about an hour and a half on this one, and we were going for about an hour on the previous one, which crashed. So, been going for about 2.5 hours now. So, and it's 2:30 a.m. here. You're feeling entitled, are you, Kaleson? Well, David, that's a bold statement. I think it's important for people to celebrate their religions without having any issues with any other religions. Each religion certainly should believe in their own religion, which by definition means that they believe theirs is the true religion, but I don't think it needs to be to the exclusion of others. I think you need to let live and let live, and bottom line, none of us know anything. You believe what you believe. We don't know. We can have faith, we can believe, but I certainly wouldn't tell another religion that it's fake. I would just try to celebrate my own religion. It's not my business to talk about other faiths. That's kind of is a difference actually between the Jewish religion and some other religions. Not all religions, but some religions. Is that the Jewish religion isn't really out to be to recruit people to its religion, whereas some other religions are evangelical to the core. I think part of that is because the Jewish religion is also a race. The Jewish people are a race. So there is some kind of, some people talk about it being racist as a result because it's exclusivist in its racial exclusivity, if you like. But people can become Jewish. It's challenging. We've talked about this before, but people can become Jewish. It's gone quiet suddenly. What's that, Sam, about Jimmy? Who's he lost? Alright, well I guess we call it an evening or a morning. Oh, his dog. Alright. That's tough. That's really hard. Somebody, when you've had a companion like that for a long time, it's really hard. I can't say I've had that experience myself, but it's certainly losing anything that's close to you is tough. Well, the issue with the evangelical, any religion that's evangelical, whether it's Christian or other religions, is that there's a certain element of force, almost, even though it may not always be aggressive, but it's like forcing other people to say, you need to believe this, otherwise you're forever damned. And that's certainly not the way in the Jewish religion. And I think the whole concept of evangelism is problematic for me. Because essentially, I don't think we're put on this world to improve other people necessarily. We're put on this world to develop ourselves and to make the world a better place by being better yourself. And if, as a congregation of humanity, we all improve ourselves, as a congregation, we improve humanity. But if all our focus is on improving other people, it's kind of a negative experience, because you're kind of focusing on negativity in order to say the difference between you and me is negative, and I'm going to try and make you better. In other words, I'm better than you, I'm holier than thou, in the true sense of the word, where it comes from, I suppose, being holier than thou, and I'm going to make you better. And that, I think, is we can leave that possibly up to some really holy people who have made themselves into, really straight up, honest people. But you know what the interesting thing is? Those people won't be evangelical. Those people will lead by example. And probably the most influential people in the world, in terms of influencing people to become better, are people who are just good themselves. They haven't gone out on the street or on Hyde Park Corner or anywhere else with a microphone saying, being the voice of doom and saying that the end of the world is nigh, repent, 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 or you're going to burn forever. Most of the people are just altruistic, charitable, do good deeds, and lead by example. And people will naturally follow people who are good internally. Yes, you do have some people who are very charismatic and they lead through their charisma, but a lot of their followers will be people who have not yet managed to realize who they themselves are, and therefore they need to latch onto somebody else in order to feel validity. And in a way, it's I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, because you have that in every religion as well. You have rabbis, you have pastors, you have reverends, you have priests who are there to guide you and to lead you and to lead the community that you belong to, and that's not a bad thing necessarily. But when you get to a point where their whole focus is evangelism, for me that's a little bit doesn't work for me. So as I say, evangelism, if I'm pronouncing it right, is based on saying that you are wrong and you are damned and I'm going to save you. Yes, it's been an interesting one. That hoo-hoo. Hi, Brian. Yes, Brian, absolutely. I think that's what I've been trying to say, and you've summarized it very well. Common decency is the common denominator that will join us all. So you don't have to be joined at the hip, but you can at least hold hands. People can learn to be brothers, not necessarily joined at the hip, but you can still be somebody's brother, but and respect them as a fellow human being. That's all it is. That should be what you see first. before seeing race, creed, color, religion, sex, the first thing you see should be a human being. Once you get to that point where you can just see a human being, a fellow human being, then I think other prejudices fall away. And I know a lot of you might think, or some of you might think, that some of my morning drives where I've talked about certain minorities, that you might think I'm prejudiced towards them. But if you have followed my channel long enough, I would hope that people would get the nuances in what I say. And maybe I'm too nuanced sometimes, and maybe people get the wrong impressions. But the first thing you got to do is see the human being. Hi Briar Bear, how you doing? I remember when my first young couple got married, my first son got married, after the wedding celebrations. The wedding celebrations last for a week, and on the train back to London, I think we went to see them off on the way to somewhere, I can't remember. Yes, Rapture, we're seeing your messages. Thank you very much, appreciate them. Yeah, I can't really comment too much of the detail of the evangelical Christians because I don't know much about it. I'm just talking about the principle of evangelism, and where it has its, I'm sure it has its place in certain scenarios, and I'm sure that in order for them to project the message, they need to focus it on a person. In order to give it structure, possibly. And maybe you're right, they're losing touch of the message and focusing too much on the person, maybe. Look, every religion has its advantages and ideologies which people will criticize. Every religion. There's a guy on the internet who's got a channel I've started watching. He's a rabbi. He's more of a sort of modern looking rabbi, but he's extremely learned person. Chad, if you're still watching, I think you'd enjoy watching his channel. But I warn you that he's a Jewish guy, obviously he's a rabbi, but one of his main purposes to his channel is to question a lot of the evangelical aspects of Christianity. And he doesn't do it from a prejudicial point of view, he does it based on Scripture, because the vast majority of religious discussion is based on people's ideologies. You know, if you listen to somebody like I'm not going to name somebody, but if you listen to a lot of the really well-known famous people, a lot of them are extremely clever people, and they are fantastically charismatic, and they're orators, and they put things over very, very well. But a lot of times it's not based on anything, it's based on their own logic, which is based on possibly their own studies of Scripture. That could be, but they don't quote Scripture. And this guy, this rabbi, his name is I can't remember. Hang on a second. I think his name is Rabbi Singer, Rabbi Tovia Singer. I'll just type him up for you in a second. Let me just see how he writes his name. Yeah, his channel. That's his channel name. And the interesting thing about this guy, and I only discovered him recently, his knowledge of Christian scripture, if you like, the Bible, the New Testament, is probably better than most priests. He's phenomenal. He's got such an encyclopedic knowledge of Christianity. He's obviously got the same encyclopedic knowledge of the Old Testament, and you got to watch him. You know, I don't want to be projecting anything, and I don't want to be telling anybody one thing's better than the other, but just as an interesting thing to watch, and just to sort of celebrate the man's knowledge and the man's genius, I think it's just interesting to watch. I would equally enjoy watching an imam talk brilliantly about Islam. It's from that point of view is what I'm trying to say. It's just somebody who's very, very interesting to watch. I don't know what that means. I know very little about the Christian religion and all the various different sects. I can imagine it was, if you were gay, then I can imagine it would have been very challenging. Well, certainly in America you have some really fundamental Christians, no question, in the Bible Belt. It reminds me of a film with what's that film called? It's an old film. I think it was It's Raining Men. I think they're singing that. They dance to that. It's raining men. Oh, I can't remember what it's called, but it kind of reminds me of that. Very, very strict upbringing. No, it's really interesting actually, because there's lots of gay people or LGBTQ people who still consider themselves to be religious, despite the fact that it goes against their religion. But the truth of the matter is that, from what I understand, in most religions, it's not the fact of being gay is not the issue. Anyway, it's not a topic that I'm well versed on, so I don't want to pretend that I know something that I don't. Well, I hope they find happiness. I don't pretend, it's often difficult to wrap your head around certain topics as a religious person. I don't have the answers to a lot of those kind of questions, but you can't know everything, and you can't have answers to everything. That's part of faith, I guess. Well, agnostics, again, I'm really not that knowledgeable on the various isms. I watch a lot of sort of people talking about various different things to do with religion, but I'm not that well versed. But agnostics, to some extent, is just simply saying you can't prove it, so I'm not going to believe in anything, isn't it? Is that basically what it is? Kind of indifferent. Yeah. Okay. Okay. I've put it in a very basic, superficial way, but yes. I'm getting towards the end. The flavor's changing. It's starting to turn a little bit ashy. You googled it, Briar Bear. I was reading somewhere today that when Google first released the search engine, it was a noun. Within 2 years, it became a verb. It became so popular that to Google something became a verb. I think it was around the turn of the century. And it is now an accepted verb. It's a phenomenal tool, but it can be very, very misleading, Google. You have to be careful. I'm smoking a Robina, a Cuban cigar from 2008. Yeah. Yeah, it has been very tasty. For me, they've all been the same. This is the last one that I've got of these. Very, very nice cigar, but they're actually quite nutty. It could do with a little bit more sweetness and richness to it, but otherwise a very nice cigar. You can see my watch. It's I think I showed it on a video the other day. I'm not a big watch shower, but I have been in the past very big into watches. This is a quite inexpensive, well, relatively speaking. It's a Seiko Kinetic diver's watch, and it's seen some really solid wear day in, day out for a good few years now, and it's extremely reliable and serves me very well. It's a really chunky watch, and pretty much the majority of watches that I wear have got this rotating bezel, and I use it very often. It's an excellent, very quick timer for up to an hour, and I find it invaluable. Bezel, this is the bezel, the bit that turns. Cigars, certainly Cuban cigars, but also non-Cubans, perhaps not as much, but Cuban cigars, aging is essential. To enjoy them properly, they have to be aged. Well, not to enjoy them properly, to enjoy them at their best. You can enjoy them properly, whatever properly means, straight away. But, well, cigars go through various stages. They can get richer, and then they can mellow out, and they can have their ups and downs. It very much depends on how you store them and how you look after them, ensuring the humidity is good. Where are you based, Rapture? Which part of the world? Oh yeah? And you smoke the Robina cigars? Yeah, definitely prefer Cuban cigars. That's not to say that I haven't got some really wonderful non-Cuban cigars, but definitely on a day-to-day basis, definitely Cuban. I don't smoke cigars as much as I did a year ago. About a year and a half ago, I converted my pipes over to 9mm pipes with a filter, and that kind of changed my whole smoking habit, or hobby, whatever you want to call it. Hi, Wildcat. So I went through a period where I was getting a lot of tongue bite, and I wasn't enjoying smoking a pipe, and I was smoking cigars much more, sometimes even 2 or 3 a day. I converted, I like that. But I'm not evangelical. You don't have to smoke a 9mm pipe. You can smoke a regular pipe. I converted around November, December 17 to 9mm pipes. And then since then I've smoked pipes much more. Well, today I've only had one pipe really, not even a whole bowl, maybe a quarter of a bowl of Erin Moore mixture. I don't smoke on the Sabbath, so sundown. The Sabbath went out this evening at 10:35 p.m. So I only got started smoking at around 11 o'clock. Had that little bit of Erin Moore mixture and then this cigar. No need to apologize, David. You're entitled to your viewpoint, and I welcome debate, and anybody can say anything they like as long as it doesn't offend anybody else, or it's not intended to offend anyone else, and it's not aggressive and abusive. You can say whatever you like. Yes, it's 4 minutes to 3 in the morning. I did have a bit of a sleep this afternoon, and I had a good night's sleep for a change last night. But I will suffer tomorrow. It's always the way it works. I'm up late on the London callings most Saturday nights, and so that's the way it goes. I didn't realise it was your first time, Rapture. Welcome. Thank you very much for joining. This Saturday nights is a fairly regular feature. Do I have a favourite pipe? It's a question I get asked a lot. It's very hard to say. I can say that I have sometimes a favourite pipe of the moment, and most people would say the favourite pipe that they have is the one they're smoking at that time. Well, a lot of people would say that. But at the moment, one of my favourite pipes, I would say, is this Savinelli Autograph. It smokes fantastically well. It's an estate pipe I bought on eBay. I don't know how old it is. It looks fairly old. It happens to also look very nice. It's got a lovely ring grain, which is probably what caught my eye initially, but smoking qualities is phenomenal. It's 9mm and it smokes fantastic. I don't think I've ever bought an Autograph new. They just seem to be extremely expensive, but when that one came up, I put in a reasonable bid, and I don't remember the exact price, but it was a very good price. It's a pleasure, David. Thank you for joining and taking part. I appreciate that. Yeah, I do definitely have some pipes which I go to more often than others. No question about that. So that's certainly one of them, which is the Savinelli. This Stanwell is another one. This Ascorti is another one. This Northern Briars is another one. I've got a couple of Boswells. This is a Boswell, which I like. This Parker, also got a lovely ring grain. This was actually a basket pipe. I paid about £35 for it. I had this one converted to 9mm. Actually, no. I mean, I don't have a particular preference in terms of the depth of the bowl, but I don't really smoke whole bowls usually. I generally smoke a half a bowl at a time, but I find that they tend to smoke better. I'm not sure why that is. I mean, I've got this pipe here which I made myself, which is quite a short smoke. I haven't really fully broken it in yet. It's got some nice grain. It's 9mm, but it's a short smoke. It's quite a small pot, and it doesn't seem to smoke so far anyway. Maybe it's just not broken in enough. But I find that the deeper pots, the deeper bowls, do smoke well. I'm not sure why that is. I'm just trying to remember. Yeah, I must be honest, when I first started smoking a pipe, I think like a lot of people, you went for all the, the pretty pipes, things which were, a variety of pipes, but I think a lot of my pipes now are fairly classical. And they're less bent than they used to be as well. When I first started, I had quite a lot of bent, almost full bent pipes, and now they'll all be slightly bent, but not full bent. I find the drill on bent pipes is never really very good. Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Straight or nearly straight for me is probably my go-to shape these days. This kind of thing works for me very well. So I don't know what you call that, if you call it a quarter bend maybe. But this kind of bend for me is my ideal. That or straight is my ideal shape. Yes, I agree. Full bends are certainly easier on the jaw, but I do find that I end up with a lot of smoke around my eyes on full bent pipes. If you're in the car or something like that and the windows are open and you've got the fan on and the smoke's blowing away, it's not such a problem. But when you're sitting in the office or working or whatever it might be, a full bent pipe for me can be problematic. Oh, well, one of my favourite places to smoke a pipe is in my car. Yeah, show off big time. With this ring. you see on YouTube some of these guys who with their vapes doing unbelievable stuff with their smoke rings. It's quite phenomenal. Well, Bribear, is it because you're smoking faster or because the tobacco is burning faster? Because your tobacco generally, if your windows are open and a fan is on, your tobacco will burn faster. If you've got a lot of air movement while you're smoking, then your tobacco will burn faster and the bowl will get hotter, and that will generally heat your tobacco up, and it will burn faster, therefore injecting more nicotine into you at a faster rate. What I do in my car is I generally, not always, but what I'll do is, especially because a lot of the time I'm recording, so a lot of my videos are done in the car, so in order to reduce the background noise, which is bad enough as it is, but just to reduce it as much as possible, I keep my front windows closed and I open my sunroof, and the smoke automatically gets drawn through the movement of air outside the car, so it becomes like a suction, and so it draws it to the back, but it's not at a vigorous rate as it would be if the front windows are open. So it helps to keep things a little bit cooler. Homestead, how you doing? I've almost ended the live a couple of times, but we seem to just end up carrying on chatting, so it's been quite a long one today. I've had two videos, one of them crashed, so we had to start another one, and we've had some really interesting chat. How you doing? Good to hear from you. I haven't seen a video from you for a while. I think I'm subscribed to you. Have you done any videos recently? Maybe I have missed them. Homestead Soap Company, everybody, is the guy who walked me through the first pipe that I made. And I really owe him a lot, a huge debt of gratitude. I did my first pipe live. It was a long, like 2 or 3 sessions, and Homestead stayed with me and really coached me all the way through. And really, as I say, huge debt of gratitude. Still have to make that good with you, Homestead. We'll do that one of these days. I'm a bit slow on my stuff, sending out stuff, but that's just the way it is. But we will do it one day. I've still got some giveaway stuff to send off, which I haven't done for, it's been a long time. But it's the way it goes. Makes a mean leather tobacco tray as well. I'm gushing and you're blushing. Well, any practical skills that I might have, also I learnt from my father. My father, he's in his 80s now, but always worked hard all his life. A very, very straight down the line guy, and he kept the roof over our heads with the sweat of his brow, sometimes having a few jobs on the go. But I remember quite specifically, and now he's physically kind of suffering because he always did everything himself. The wear and tear on his joints are really taking its toll. But I remember very, very clearly there was a time when financially, we didn't know it at the time because he never sort of shared with us the difficulties, the financial difficulties that we were going through. I suppose that's also a bit different nowadays, because I don't tend to hide stuff really. We're not like that, so closed off as people were in previous generations. But I can very clearly remember my father, he used to work in Heathrow Airport in one of the catering departments, and he used to get up at like 4 or 5 in the morning because the meals had to be done in time for the flights that day. So he would get up and go to Heathrow Airport, which is about probably from where we lived at the time, probably a 45-minute drive, an hour's drive. Every morning he'd go at 4 in the morning, and then he'd be home by lunchtime. Then he'd start another job, and he would do he used to work for a confectionery company, chocolate bars and things like that, and he used to do deliveries from a supplier, and he used to take them around to all the little kiosks in train stations. If you go down into the train stations nowadays, you have big shops and stuff like that, but in those days, going back 40 years maybe, you'd have a little kiosk on the platform or something like that, and they would sell cigarettes and newspapers and drinks and chocolates. So he used to have this run of maybe, I don't know, 10 or 20 different stations that he had to go to. He'd have his car full of sweets and things like that, and he'd have his runs that he'd have to do through the week. Then he'd come home from that, and he would then go into the basement, and he used to do some piecework at home for jewelry companies, literally physically linking chain, and he would just sit there for hours on end, and that's what he did to make ends meet. Literally worked all the hours God gives, and he worked very hard all his life, but he was a very practical man. Good night, Josh. And all the decoration, I remember watching him and helping him doing hanging up wallpaper, painting the house, all that kind of stuff. He did that all, and that's where I get it from, really. And I took things a little bit further on some things, although I've never hung wallpaper, at least not on my own. But I've dabbled a little bit in plumbing, a little bit in electrical, which my father didn't really do. I think he was weary of electrics, which I don't blame him for. I've had the odd electrical shock in my time. I remember once as a kid, I used to sleep in the same room with my brother, and we had in between the beds a strip light, a little fluorescent light for reading and stuff like that. And I remember once I wanted to relocate it, and so I used to do a lot of that kind of stuff in my room to make it feel like my own. I used to move stuff around and put cupboards up and that kind of stuff. And I remember once wanting to extend the cable on that light, and I wasn't sure if it was live or what. I don't know why, but I knew that you must never, my father always told me this as a kid, never grab a cable like that, always with the back of your hand, because if you get an electric shock, it makes your muscles contract. So if you're holding something electrical and it's live, then you're going to grab it and you won't be able to let go, and you'll just be doing that. So I remember as a kid, I don't know how old I was, maybe about 10 or 11, and there was these cables, bare cables hanging there, and I remember doing that just to see if it was live. I must have been mad. Anyway, I did that, and it was live, and I got a huge bolt of electricity up my arm. But that's was a good lesson for me. But I was never afraid to work with electrics. Just the other day, I installed a time switch here at home for some lighting circuits. Yeah. I remember once on vacation, we were in a field with, I think there were cows in the field, so they had an electric fence around it, and we touched that. Got a bit of a shock. I think that was up in the Lake Districts. Well, the cigar is still going. This is something a lot of people do when you're knobbing a cigar, and just stick it in the end of a pipe and carry on smoking it once it gets too hot to touch. And that fit is not tight enough. That's another of the pipes that I made a while back. This one should fit. Yeah. My rarest pipe. Well, some of the Astley pipes are rare simply because the company doesn't exist anymore. Yeah, I did my first stem as well the other day. I talked about it earlier on. Eldritch Pipes sent me a couple of blanks. This is one of them. And where is it? This is what I had made the other day. Not without its challenges, because I ended up cracking it. But overall was quite happy with the progress. And that's from a round blank. That's the first stem I've cut ever. You visited Astley's? Wow, that is cool. How long ago was that, Rapture? Well, that must have been just before it closed. Did you ever have Dunhill tobaccos mixed up for you in Jermyn Street? Well, I've been trying to get in touch with Mark Burrows, who was the last blender for Dunhills, and I've never had the opportunity to talk to him yet. There was a guy in the shop who I spoke to who said he was going to put me in touch with him, but so far I haven't managed. So what stuff do you still have from the last century? Do you still have some tobaccos from 20 years ago? What was Mr. Alfred's own and 27? What kind of tobaccos were they? English tobaccos or Latakia tobaccos or not? Oh, I see. So you're into Latakias. Okay. I smoke a fair amount of Latakia tobaccos myself, but cheers, Homestead. But I'm not hugely into them. I used to be only smoking Latakias, but I've moved on to Virginias and Vapors now. Well, Rapture, if you'd be interested in trading, I would love to taste some of the old downhill tobaccos. Especially if you have any of the Virginias, maybe some old Navy rolls, that kind of thing. Well, Rapture, if you're interested in doing a trade, drop me an email. I'll show you my email address. Because it would be really nice to just do some videos of that on my channel. Just to be nice to taste some of the older tobaccos. And if there's anything you'd like from here, be happy to trade. Or maybe some cigars, maybe. I'd be keen to try some of the original mixtures that were sort of mixed, especially, in other words, not tinned. Some of the stuff that was mixed, in the shop, that kind of thing. Which, I've never tried any of those, and it would just be interesting to try, to put it on my channel, that kind of thing. I like to try and have a good, well, don't send me anything that's rare for you and you want to keep. But even a bowlful, just to try it, would be nice. It's unique, and I try to have a nice sort of varied content on my channel. Well, everything comes to an end. All good things come to an end, as they say. That's good of you, Rapture. It sounds like you've got a pretty deep cellar there. That's exactly what I was just thinking. But I think a lot of us have more tobacco than we can ever smoke. I'm not sure that I've reached that stage yet, but I'd have to still smoke for a good number of years to get through what I have at the moment. And of course we keep adding, so... Yeah, Maui was saying earlier on that the Christmas cheer from 2004 is something I should try. Wouldn't we all wish to live to 150? Well, I'm not sure if everybody would, actually. I'm not sure how much you could smoke once you reach 90. Yeah, I'm kind of working towards doing the same kind of thing, Briar Bear. I don't know if you saw my video from the other day, talking about trying to sort of regenerate the YTPC to back to how I remember it, which it may still be the same. Maybe I'm just watching the wrong channels, but I don't know. I find a lot of the sort of tobacco swapping and trying seems to have gone, and it's all about giveaways and people trying to get free stuff and that kind of thing. And so I want to try and get back into that. So I do want to start sending stuff out. I sent a couple of packages out the other day, one to Canada and one to somebody here in the UK, with a few of the blends that we got at the Nottingham Pipe Show, some of the tester blends from Garth Hogarth. Smoke 65. Thanks for joining. You love your Savinelli. What Savinelli do you have? Which one? Yeah, 100%, Bribe. I've really slowed down on my tobacco purchases. Really have. 673 matches. The last tobacco that I bought is the 1820 flake, which is just brought out by Jermaine's, which is very nice. And I'll buy the odd tin here and there, but the days of buying 10 tins at a go are long gone. It's, I think if there was one blend that I would like to get, which I've mentioned quite a few times recently, if I had the opportunity to get it, then I would probably stock up on, is a blend from the Danish Pipe Shop. Their My Own Blend Vintage Flake. Oh, I think aging on Latakia blends, depending on the blend, definitely will make changes to the blend. Whether it's positive changes, up to you, whether it's something that you like, but certainly it will, well, any blend that's brand new and fresh will need time to harmonize and for the flavors to marry, but the only ones which probably don't improve over a long period of time is aromatics. The rest, I think, all will improve, because aromatics are essentially usually Virginia burleys, and with a focus more on burleys, and because they generally tend to carry flavour well, or Cavendish, but the aromatics will generally evaporate, and sometimes they'll actually turn, I wouldn't say bitter, but they'll actually not be as good as they were when they were fresh. For me, a good example of that is actually Erinmore. I find I prefer Erinmore than aged Erinmore. I opened a tin of Erinmore from the 70s recently. No, not from the 70s. It was the turn of the century. And I don't think it's as good as the current version. To my palate, anyway. It's probably purer than the current version. But Latakia blends, for sure. I mean, if you take even Penzance or Special Latakia Flake, any of those, and you smoke it down the line, it will, hi Daniel, you're a bit late, it will taste a lot better, a lot smoother, a lot more mellow, and the flavours will have melded to a much greater extent. But I think that's probably the case more with Virginia forward Latakia blends, because the Virginia is what ages the best and adds sweetness to the blend. So something like Special Latakia Flake is really, the majority of it is Virginia, and that really does improve with age. Cheers, Rapture. Just got your email. Thank you very much. Well, I'm sure we will be in touch. Have you got Special Latakia Flake, Rapture? Oh, you got to try that. Okay, so that's something I can send you. Trying to think what I can compare it to give you an idea. Yeah, it's Jermaine's. Have you got esoterica blends? Have you got, for instance, and so to bed? Have you smoked that? Well, I haven't really got Stonehaven. I've got about 1 or 2 flakes of Stonehaven, but I've got Rich Dark Flake, which is pretty much the same. And so to bed is very similar, I would say, to Special Latakia Flake. Well, I think Special Latakia Flake is better. No, I have not smoked this pipe yet. This is the mortar pipe I made not so long ago. Came out very well, actually. Haven't smoked it yet. I might actually send this to somebody. We'll see. And this one, if that's the one you meant, Daniel, this is a Guard Hill. It's a French St. Claude pipe, which I tried to make a stem, a 9mm stem for. And that was the story in my first London Calling video earlier tonight, so if you want to hear all of that, you can watch that. But it was a bit of a fail, but it was an interesting journey, and I learnt a lot of lessons making it. The first stem that I've cut. I was kind of intimidated by making my own stems, and that was a good exercise in breaking that intimidation. So I'm not afraid of it anymore. But I tell you what, it's extremely labor intensive. I spent making this stem from a rod blank like that into that probably about 3.5 hours. Had a pipe which is now owned by Stephen, Cobbett of the Shire. It was a pot pipe made by Paul Menard, Paul's Pipes, and he also made me a churchwarden stem to go with it, and I asked him to make me another stem to make it a stubby pot. So he made that separately for me, and he charged me $60 for it, and I thought, wow, that's a lot of money for a stem. But I realised that there's a huge amount of work which goes into making a stem. I think some carvers spend more time on the stem than they do on the pipe itself, and I can see why that would be true. Alright, I think I've had enough tobacco for one evening. I'm starting to get the sweats. That's probably also fatigue, because it is 3:30 AM. Thanks, David. Gentlemen, yeah, a lot of people ask me about this ashtray. This was made by a guy called Jason, and he was called Woodworks, spelt wood and then W-E-R-K-S. Thanks, Rapture, you too. I can't remember, it was called something with a number after it, Woodwork something. Anyway, he stopped making them, so at the moment I don't know if he'll ever get back to making them, but I ordered this one as a custom design. I mean, he was big into doing these kind of copper shavings and different types of, semi-precious stones and things like that. And he also made it sort of more simpler, flat ones. I ordered one sort of a half of that height, and I had him send it to somebody in Canada as a gift. It's going back a couple of years. But they're very good. The great thing about this is that this is magnetic. This comes out, and he also provides you with a cork so you can use it as a pipe ashtray as well. So I have the cork in that box up there, and it just slots in, and it's a knocker. I think he used to say that you could lift up the ashtray by the magnet, but I've got stuff in here now, so it's heavier. Alright everybody, time to say arrivederci. Briar Bear, Rapture, Daniel, Smoke 65. Everybody else I think is gone now. But thank you everybody for joining. Would I ever make an ashtray? I probably would like to. I'd like to learn how to do them. I would like to be able to just turn my hand at making lots of different things if I can. And I hope at some stage later in life, God willing, that I'll be able to just make a bit of pocket money when I've retired, perhaps, from the creations that I make. It would be cool to be able to do that. And that's kind of where I'm going with my pipe making, is I'm not expecting to make any real money from it now. I've managed to sell a few of my pipes, but I've started giving them away. So we'll see how we go. Thanks everybody. Thanks Wildcat. Wish you all a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the rest of it. And I will catch you on the very next one.